Hi, it's Jo and Steve from Fresh Agenda. And Steve, this week we're going through the latest update of our Global Dairy Directions Outlook.
Which we released earlier this week.
Yes, to our subscribers.
Pack it up, pack it in, let me begin.
So what are the highlights?
I suppose the biggest, starting at the high level, not a lot of change in the outlook.
No.
Market seems broadly in balance. If anything, our outlook improved slightly compared to July. When we look across the board at milk production, though, it's an interesting situation because milk supply growth is actually falling. We're in a period, the second half of this year, where growth in output by the top 5 exporters is growing at less than 0.5% over the same period last year.
And that's really all about the European story, isn't it? Those negative red blocks there.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we're going to see a bullish market. It still has commodities quite mixed. As you can see on the right-hand side, that's showing that we're still for a period of time, we're still in a net supply situation. We've still got a lot of stock. And we've got different things happening to the commodities across the board, which we'll talk about. So our approach, as always, we take the approach of looking at the different commodity price drivers in each region and what the major factors are, and the connections between those regions as we step around the globe, and we go across the commodity spectrum. We show there the big flashpoints.
Yes.
Weather and demand, unsurprisingly, but weather in Europe slowing output, impacting product choices and product availability. Weather in New Zealand, so they're working in different ends, I suppose. That's the thing, going in different directions. But the importance of butterfat demand in Europe and the demand balance in US,
Yes.
which is coming back into balance.
Yes.
They're probably the biggest issues that we've analysed. Just stepping around the big things that matter in the outlook, and this is where our work drives in a little bit of detail. We see slower milk output in Europe, though there's a bit of rebound from poor conditions, very hot conditions. We'd expect that to start showing up in the feed availability during winter.
So that's really a story about a bit of feed being drawn down over the last few months and what's going to be available to them in this last quarter.
Yeah, they've drained the feed bank.
Yes.
Leaving themselves short. So we'll watch the prices for commodities that will impact the feed decisions made. Sure. And whether there's culling. The US market's getting a bit tighter, milk slowing down, demand picking up, and that's going to support the cheese market, we think, mostly, and that might take a bit of pressure off cheese values in this part of the world, in Oceania. EU protein, so skim milk powder prices have reacted positively, very slowly, but and not stunningly, but slightly positively to more coming out of the government sheds.
So we just had a tender last week and around 30,000 tonnes sold and slightly better price than the previous tender. So that was seen as a bit of a positive, wasn't it?
That's right. The other thing connected to the US market, there's been some resolution of the buddying up between the US and Mexico, and that's seen as a positive and has seen Mexico come back strongly. So that'll boost demand for protein and cheese.
Yes.
In the US market.
Not a lot of detail, but we're hoping it's true.
There's never much detail there. Yeah. And the last thing, and I put a question mark beside this, the stable oil market. Oil is hanging around above, near and above $70 a barrel. We've seen trade pick up in the Middle East and North Africa region lately, and it probably means the economies are doing a bit better, more affordability.
There's always another side though, Steve.
There is. So on the negatives, Jo, New Zealand looks like it's going to have a cracker.
Yeah, we sort of went through that last week, didn't we?
We did, and you're saying we
positive.
don't need to keep going back through that, so let's move on. Weaker demand for butter. So at high prices, this is not just an EU story, because there's certainly retail pushback at high prices. This is a story in general trade. The butter market is smaller, and that there has been an improvement in trade, but it's a struggle. So New Zealand's got a bit of a butter problem. Yeah,
which we'll touch on a little later.
It's an interesting point. The US dollar strength is making it harder for some import regions to afford dairy commodities.
Sure.
We've seen that in Indonesia, Philippines, where that's pushed through higher values. Bit of uncertainty, as we know, about trade policy as to where some of those things end up,
Yeah.
particularly the impact on the Chinese economy.
Yeah, that's a quite a generalised malaise, isn't it? A lot of uncertainty around affecting people's perspectives on demand.
Yeah, and that'll seep into sentiment over time, I think,
Sure.
the longer that hangs around. There's a threat of, we certainly factored into our numbers, that India will export skim milk powder to the tune of about 100,000 tonnes, which is going to be subsidised by local governments trying to clear surplus stocks. And the last one, quite a bit of turbulence in the economies in South America. So we're seeing more whole milk powder availability out of South America lately. If those economies get worse, if particular Argentina, their domestic market might be a bit weaker. So more whole milk powder availability might come as a result of that. So they're the big things we're looking at. As usual, we add up the world market, looking at the variables that impact supply and demand either side, and draw out a number of conclusions, in particular the prospects for where values going forward based on those fundamentals. So that's gone out to subscribers this week.
I came to win, battle me, that's a sin.
Your chart of the week, Joanne.
Yeah, and so this week is a GDT event week, and we saw just a little drop in the overall price index of about 0.6.
0.7, I think.
0.7, but a little bit of action underlying that small change. So just seeing a bit more pushback, as we said earlier, on fat prices, butter in particular, and that's based on some of the work that we've done in the last week or so with that global dairy directions update. That's really about a bit more stock available.
Yeah, it's a higher production expected out of New Zealand, but there's already a surplus sitting there, it seems, but adding up the numbers as to what's likely to be produced. Of course, they don't publish production numbers, but what's been produced and what's been soaked up by the trade. So there would appear to be a bit on hand looking for markets.
Yeah, and obviously whole milk powder a bit weaker again, as it's been over the last few events, and that's obviously important for the overall index. That's the largest product on the platform, and then skim milk powder just gaining a little bit in the last auction. So always one to watch.
Yeah. Okay, well that's probably a wrap for us. Thanks for watching. We'll be back same time next week.
I came to get down, so get out your seat and jump around.